Hi, my name is Clare and I'm the mother of 3 teenagers with FASD.
I'm Jessica, a PhD researcher specialising in educational interventions for children with FASD.
And together we are the hosts of Spotlight on FASD, the UK's first podcast dedicated to shining a spotlight on fetal alcohol spectrum disorders.
FASD is a condition caused by prenatal alcohol exposure that affects hundreds of thousands of children across the UK.
And we're here to bring these conversations out of the shadows and make sure that no one living with FASD feels alone.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of Spotlight on FASD. We are joined by another very exciting guest this week, Judith Knox, who is a parent of a child with FASD and also is now the FASD coordinator at FASD Fife. So Judith's joining us today to speak about her journey and how that led her to her involvement with this new service that's just being launched up in Scotland. So hi Judith.
And thank you for inviting me along to speak today.
Thank you.
So I came into the world of FASD through my adopted son, who is 14 and a half years old now. I adopted him along with my partner at the time when he was a baby. So he was 6 months old. We had no indication that there would be any challenges apart from.
You weren't told about anything.
FASD. I hadn't heard of it at that point, and I hadn't heard of it for many years after that point.
Common theme with the parents that we talk to.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
So we were told that there may be some attachment issues. But my son was removed from his birth mother at a day old, and we were really advised that attachment would potentially be an issue, but there shouldn't be any other issues. In fact, he was actually, I think he was described as a golden child at that point in time, because he was a baby removed at birth, and hadn't experienced trauma with birth family.
As far as they're concerned, they've eliminated trauma.
Exactly.
Exactly. And you won the lottery.
Exactly. So with that in mind, shiny, happy adopters, we went off and we started to parent our son. And it was difficult, it was a challenge, but never having had children before and not really had a lot of experience, we thought, yeah, it's just us. It's just, we're not used to parenting. We need to take a bit of advice. And probably we started to look for professional help. I mean, we'd asked friends and family and things, do you think that, that behaviour is normal? And some of the behaviours that my son was displaying as maybe a 1-year-old were things like head banging, eating carpets, eating the plaster out the walls in his bedroom, biting his fingers to stop him going to sleep until his fingers actually bled. So even though we were new parents, we knew that wasn't, that wasn't entirely, as we say, normal. So then probably about 18 months old, when we released him from the buggy and the high chair and the car seat, all the things that keeps him contained, when we released him from that, our world turned upside down. It was just utter chaos. And very hyperactive, very, very challenging behaviour. And I used to find myself, as I adopted my son when I was 40. So I was an older mother. And I used to, be out and about in the community. And I used to think to myself, wow, look at that young mum and her 3 children. And she's got them all under control. And it looks like a breeze. And here's me, a harassed, sweaty 40-year-old really struggling with this one child, And I thought, wow. So I questioned myself a lot in the first instance. And then about 18 months old, as I say, when he was started to walk, and I mean, he was meeting his milestones. There wasn't any concerns around that. I contacted the health visitor and I said, look, I think there's something, that we need support with here. Then very quickly we were referred to a paediatrician, and my son was diagnosed with ADHD on his 4th birthday. So happy birthday. The diagnosis came. I was very against medication for my son at that point, but the difficulties were just, they were growing. And the main difficulty was, at that point, was the violence.
At 4 years old?
4 years old was quite extreme violence towards myself in particular.
Can I ask, when you got, so the ADHD diagnosis came, and there was absolutely no mention at all about his experience in utero, about any kind of alcohol or substance exposure at all. It was just straight, even though he was care experienced, it was just straight to ADHD.
Absolutely. We never got asked the question about pre-birth history. It was just very much based on the symptoms that he was displaying, which was the hyperactive, lacking focus and attention, etc. We, after a while, after potentially about a year, I think it was, and following when he started nursery, the nursery then indicated that they felt that there was something maybe more going on than ADHD. And I had sat up, as you do when you're a mum, and you're thinking to yourself, there's something going on here I don't understand. And you're lying in bed at 4 o'clock in the morning and you're Googling and you're looking, and I thought, well, I'll give medication a go. So we trialed, it must have been about 4 or 5 different ADHD medications, and every single one of them actually made my son more aggressive.
Yeah.
And at that point, I thought to myself, this is not vanilla ADHD as I describe it. I thought there's something else going on. And I suppose at that time, I still hadn't heard of, pre-birth alcohol exposure, FASD. So I was kind of thinking to myself, this could be autism. So going back to the paediatrician, time after time after time again, my son was assessed for ASD. He met some of the criteria, but not all of the criteria. And his difficulties started to really show when he went into primary 1, 2. He needed support, so he got support at school. There was a lot of difficulties, particularly around relationships, peer relationships, and social interaction. He so desperately wanted friends and to interact, but he just got it wrong every single time, nearly. I think at one point during his school experience, I was told that 80% of the complaints from children in the playground were either about Jason, my son, or from Jason, my son. And at that point, I thought, wow, there's obviously something going on here. And going back to when he was 6 years old, I had separated from my partner at the time, and I was living and bringing Jason up myself, although my partner was still very much involved at the time. And there was one morning that I was lying asleep in bed, and my son got up very early. He was very difficult to sleeper, so he'd go to very much a challenge to get him off to sleep at night. He didn't wake during the night, but he did wake very early in the morning. And on this particular morning, he came into my bedroom and he asked me for a sweetie. I think it was a sweetie. And of course I said, well, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, you really need to go back to bed. It's not time to get up, etc. And I must have fell asleep and thinking that he was back in his bed. And he actually came into my bedroom. I don't know how long after that I'd spoken to him. He came into the bedroom and actually stabbed me with a knife. So that day, I wasn't very badly injured, but I was injured. That day we had an appointment with a paediatrician that we had been going to for the ADHD clinic. And very luckily, and I didn't know at the time, that paediatrician had an interest in FASD. And that paediatrician is retired now, but it was Dr. Christia, who actually went on to be the advisor to the Scottish Government for FASD in 2018, 19, 20. So I went along to an appointment with Jason. I thought, right, okay, I'm going to leave him in the waiting room on his own with the play person, let him cause chaos, and I'm going to go in to my appointment with the paediatrician, and I'm going to say to them, we need to look at what's going on here, and I'm not going to leave until we have a discussion around what other conditions that this might be that's affecting, or what else is affecting my son. And about a week before that, I had accidentally stumbled on one of my nighttime Google searches. I stumbled on FASD, and I mentioned it to Dr. Steer, the consultant, and we left that day with an FASD diagnosis, which I know that raises eyebrows for a lot of people, because the process that people have to go through now, that was long before the signed guidelines here in Scotland. And the consultant did look back Jason's records, and in his health records there was mention of pre-birth alcohol exposure, but that's not something that we had highlighted to us on any of the health questionnaires or any of the Form Fs or anything like that leading up to the adoption. Not that it would have made any difference, because we wouldn't have. You really don't know what's in front of you. Someone said to you, a child with FASD, we would have said, yeah, absolutely, bring it on, we can cope with this. But until you're actually in it and living it, you have absolutely no idea the impact that it can have on your life, your career, your finances, your relationships. It's such a massive impact on all areas of your life, your health and well-being as well.
And
that's such a bad thing. Oh, go on, sorry, Jess.
A really important thing about FASD as well, because just because that pre-birth alcohol exposure is there doesn't necessarily mean that there will be FASD, and it doesn't give you any indication of the extent of FASD or how it will present in that individual. And it, all is
it's just a label. It's just words. And until you actually have experience of bringing and raising a child with FASD, it's very, very difficult to know just the impact that it does have on your life. So at that point, we had a diagnosis. We trialled an antipsychotic medication, and for 18 months, my son was violence-free. There was no aggression. It's like night and day.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. And we were able to repair relationships, because the relationship between myself and my son was quite strained. And within that 18 months, we became very close again. And I thought, great, this is fantastic. We found a fix for this, and we're going to be all right. But obviously he grows, matures, his body changes, etc. And after the 18-month period, the aggression started to creep in again. And the health board weren't prepared to look at increasing that medication, because my son refused to have blood tests for monitoring. So he was kept on the same dose from age 6 right up until, well, actually, he's still on the same dose. We changed tomorrow to an increased dose.
Wow.
So it's taken all those years of me asking for it to be reviewed as he's gotten older. So from there, I thought I was the only person, the only mum. We were the only family. My son was the only child with FASD in Fife. I'd never heard of anyone else having the condition. So I felt really alone, very isolated. People didn't really understand. I didn't really understand. That's, if the truth be told, we didn't really understand what was going on.
There's not a lot out there. It's sort of, here's a label, and then
exactly. There was no support. It was here's the diagnosis and off you go.
Did you find that? Did you have a feeling of, because I'm thinking back to when you were talking about the morning when he woke up and he'd attacked you with a knife. Was your immediate thought how to protect him from the situation? I think there's a taboo topic, child-to-parent violence, and it is a part of everyday adoption. It is a part of everyday adoption. I think if child-to-parent violence isn't happening, that is the exception to the rule.
I totally agree with you.
I think an overwhelming, I think quite often, certainly because there's a very different relationship I think adoptive kids have with the mums over the dads, like the link to birth mum and things. I think it's like one of my overwhelming fears is always, if something happens, I don't want people to think or feel negatively about my children, because it is not their fault. So you probably tolerate 1,000,000 times more than someone who isn't in your situation when it comes to what you kind of just take on the chin and just think.
Yeah, as an example of that. When my son was in primary school, and I used to go and collect him, and we lived in a different village, so I had to go by car. So I would collect him. He would run right past me out of the school without any acknowledgement. He would cross the road. They did use the zebra crossing, so that was one saving grace.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would run to the car, and he would climb on top of the bonnet and then onto the roof of the car. And I would be walking quite calmly back to the car, and I could see, sometimes I would look at other parents that were collecting their children and just have a look at their faces, and occasionally I heard a few comments about, why doesn't she stop him doing that? Why doesn't she do something about that? But I knew myself that if I tried to challenge my son, he would probably kick my windscreen in and hurt himself. So I used to just casually stroll up, open my car, get in, start the engine and sit. And I knew that my son would get off the roof, climb down off the bonnet, get into the car. We wouldn't say anything. We wouldn't even mention it. And we would just drive off. Yeah. And you just you just start to normalise things like that. And it's not normal.
What you know now, so what you know now is that was the whole like a kind of coping in school or sensory, that's just the whole Coke bottle thing. What was therapeutic parenting, meeting that need when it comes to the sensory issue, but you probably had no idea that that's what you were doing then. Mm-hmm. Your instinct as a mother told you that you need to ignore everybody and thinking, well, I wouldn't be letting my son do that. And you knew that you learn what it takes to to keep a situation calm and safe. And to the naked eye, to the uneducated eye, it looks like you're a pushover. It looks like they are ruined. And often when people know, and you live at your little village and you go, I remember someone at my in my eldest son's class once saying to him, "Oh well, yeah, but because you're adopted, my mum says that your mum goes easy on you. You don't get it wrong properly." And that, you know, there's this whole of compensating because they're adopted, they're letting them get away with absolute murder, and it's not. And I think in the early days, when you don't know what you're dealing with, you instinctively do that.
Absolutely, because therapeutic parenting wasn't a term I'd ever heard of. I was still very much trying to do the reward charts and the sticker charts, and you know,
all of that.
Once you get to the end of the week, we can have a little trip to McDonald's, and then I started to think, wait a minute, this child needs instant gratification. He can't wait for a week and 6 stickers, you know, and it went against everything that my parents, who were elderly, were advising me. It went against everything that my friends who had children maybe 25 years previous to that were telling me, and it just didn't sit comfortably. And then you have the super nanny on the TV, and you know, the naughty step, and I used to think, absolutely, you know, that's just not going to work here. So you do, like you say, instinctively start to therapeutically parent, you know, without even realising what it is.
Without knowing that that's the thing, without knowing that you're doing it at all, you just know that that is exactly what you need to do.
And you do start, you know, and I would say probably quite a few people have said to me, you know, Jason's trying to control you. He is manipulative. And I just stop them right there, you know, and I say, no, it's not. It's he doesn't feel safe in a particular situation, or he is struggling with maybe peer relationships or the environment that he's in, or whatever, and that, you know, he needs understanding and help and support. He doesn't need punitive consequences for what is not behaviour in my eyes. It's symptoms of FASD.
I always compare it to, if you imagine a child having a seizure, having an epileptic fit, nobody would ever agree. If you know, a child has an epileptic fit, falls, the phone drops out of the hand and it's smashed, it makes you feel uncomfortable to think that you would even consider not replacing the phone, or punish, or maybe you're not able to replace the phone, but punishing them for that, for doing that. You wouldn't dream of punishment for that happening. All you do is reassure them and make them feel better and get them back into a safe place and make sure that they're well. When our kids are overwhelmed and they have episodes, or muddles, that's what we call them, muddles, and we have some. Yeah, because it's just a big muddle, and we've used it from the being mine of 14, 15, 16 there. So, but size 14 shoe muddles happen in my house. So they're bigger than they used to be when they were little, but still muddles, and they still call it that because it's not a horrible word. It's not meltdown. It's not.
I hate that word. I hate that.
Yeah, it's just the only person with meltdowns in my house, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
No, yeah, exactly. They have muddles, and it's just it explains everything, because everything's muddled up. So, you know, when you were talking about how you would try and say, if you can manage your behaviour well, if you're a good boy, and when you think about it, you basically say, if you can control your brain injury like a good boy all week, I'll get you a McDonald's. It's absurd now, but what I've learned, because I did it times 3.
Yeah.
What I've learned now, what that the equivalent is, where any anticipation, any kind of excitement, looking forward to anything, it's just a big knot of fear in their chest that will have their behaviour out of their control. And you don't know what you a story to you. That's what I was dealing with my 3. I was one of the lucky ones. It was kind of just neglect. That's what I was told. Maybe a little bit of attachment. They were too young to remember anything.
You would be absolutely fine then. No problems.
And and I thought, well, I've got this absolutely nailed because I can do that. No problem. And it was me and me now ex-husband. We adopted them together, and it's just that this strain's just massive.
It's huge.
So yeah, and I stumbled across fetal alcohol exposure on Pinterest, and actually very similar to you, I got my diagnosis came quickly, pretty effortlessly, to be honest, for all 3.
Which is highly unusual. I think we've been very fortunate.
Very, very unusual.
Yep.
The route that I was diagnosed in my area, it's not even an option for someone living where I live now to get diagnosed that way. So I think there's just people have got we've definitely got similarities in our story. I think everyone hasn't, but a positive spin on it all is what Jess and I love to see. When we know better, we do better. And we do the best with what we know. And so, I was going through the adoption process like 15 years ago. So it's a lot of time has passed. Although there was a lot of that knowledge around then, certainly I don't think the knowledge around trauma and the impact of trauma, definitely not pre-birth trauma. That knowledge wasn't commonplace. It is now.
I have to say that when we've reached out and had some post-adoption support, they have actually acknowledged that if Jason, my son, was to come up for adoption now as a baby, he would be classed as a hard-to-place child because his future was so unknown. So,
which is massively different.
15 years from what we were told. Yeah, 15 years previous, we were told golden child. Yeah. For a long time, I was actually quite angry with social work service for what I felt was withholding information. But in actual, once my calmness returned, and I realised that there was just a lack of understanding, a lack of knowledge, and their knowledge of FASD and trauma, and just like you're saying, has increased massively since the time when we adopted, both of us, because it was around about the same time. So hopefully going forward for families who are adopting now will be better informed, better supported, and not feel so alone. And I think that is going back to following when my son was diagnosed, and the feeling of being just totally alone and totally just didn't know what to do for the best for my son, for us as a family. I thought to myself, right, I must be the only person, we must be the only family. And then I started to discover that there was other families in Fife, in the local area. And I thought, yeah, wouldn't it be great if we had some sort of support here? There's loads of support for, ASD. And I thought, that's just absolutely nothing. It's just such a huge gap. So probably from about 2017, I started to think more seriously about it. And then there was one day in 2018, probably, towards the end of 2018, I was driving in the car and had the radio on, the local radio, and I heard the manager of Fife Alcohol Support Service, and he was talking about pre-birth alcohol exposure and the impact that it can have. Yeah. I screeched the car to a halt without looking in the rear view mirror. Yeah. So luckily I got away with that. Picked up the phone and called him, and I said, "Can I come in and speak to you?" So a couple of weeks later, went in, had a meeting with him, said to him, look, I'm really keen to get something up and running to support families. By that time, I'd identified about 20 families in Fife.
Wow.
Yeah. And he was keen, but it took until this year for us to get some funding. So it's been a long journey. At times I've thought we're not going to get there, and then other times I've thought, listen, what you deal with on a daily basis, this is going to happen. You're going to make it happen, and nobody's going to stand in your way. So we were very lucky
during that time as well, which I'm sure has changed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So during that time, obviously, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is much more in the public domain. People are becoming more aware. Becoming more aware. It's slow. And obviously in Scotland, things move quite quickly from about 2017-18. And services started to develop. And, I thought to myself, well, that's fine. So I was connected into those services as a parent, and I was accessing them and I was getting support, and it was great. And I thought, it would be really nice if I just had somebody, more local, and we could connect. And the other families, the other parents were saying to me, it would be great if we could just, formalise this. So, we got our funding from the National Lottery Awards for All Scotland, and we've been up and running now. This is the end of our 6th week, so relatively new. I have been absolutely run off my feet.
So you launched start of May?
Yes, I came in at post on the 3rd of May, and it's been full steam ahead since that point on.
With families getting in touch?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the first things I did was that I wrote a handbook for parents and carers. So that's gone down really, really well. It's quite comprehensive. So it's got information about FASD. It's got information around changing the narrative, because I think that's really important. And that's, we're all trying to do that. It's also got lots of information around what FASD, how it presents on a day-to-day basis. So what life is like, what it looks like. A lot of top tips, and quite a significant part about therapeutic parenting. So around PACE and around NVR as well. So
everything that you wish you'd have known.
Everything that I would have liked to have known many years ago, and maybe I wouldn't have added to the trauma.
Yeah, that's what I always
feel that.
I always say that is my biggest burden that I carry through my life, the knowledge that I absolutely did add to their trauma on a daily basis for years.
I did as well. I did, and we can't go back and redo it, but
but it's a fact, isn't it?
It's a fact, isn't it? And it's a heavy thing to carry with you, because you're also dealing with a lot of loss and grief about what you thought life was going to look like, and then you're dealing with those feelings about I've added to the difficulties, I've added to the trauma, on top of the condition itself. So yeah, very difficult. So that was the first thing I wanted to do, was have something tangible to offer parents and carers. So that's been really well received. So we've had, I think we've had about 67 requests for copies of it, and it's gone as far down to London. So it's not just in Fife, it's gone.
That's what I was about to ask. Can we put a link to the?
Absolutely.
Is it only for people in Fife? Right. Okay. Brilliant. We'll do that on the YouTube post and on our social media, definitely, because like you say, that is like, it's a little bit of a basic how guide, isn't it? And absolutely what you need when you are parenting FASD, certainly when you don't know anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite a colourful publication, lots of imagery and stuff like that. So it's not just boring text.
Not too heavy.
It's not too heavy. It's quite long, but it's not too heavy. But part of the length of it is the fact that there's a lot of contacts. So there are FASD specific contacts for Scotland. Then for across the UK, you guys are also mentioned in it. And then there's local contacts for those in Fife, for services that they might find useful, etc. So we did that. We've got a training package up and ready. The first training that I'm delivering is on the 30th of this month, and that is to third sector organisations. And then I think we've got another 3 training sessions set for across June and July, mostly July. The first one is at the end of this month in June. So I'm really excited about that. I also have an adult who has FASD, who I think is just amazing. She lives independently, she works, she drives a car, she manages life. She does have her struggles, but she manages life. She's actually going to come along and support me at the training, so I think that's really useful.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So had a contact from, which has really surprised me, and this might surprise you. I've had numerous contacts from a child mental health from CAMS, which actually blindsided me. I didn't expect that. So, and from the looked after child section of our service of CAMS, very interested in the handbook, etc., and about referring families on, and also families of older children, so 16 plus, who have been referred to me and the project through criminal justice. So,
but what fantastic work this is. It's making my heart feel happy.
Do you know what? I think I'm working about 3 times the amount of hours I get paid, but you know, I live and breathe FASD. You'll know it yourself. So I am absolutely loving it. We've built up a really quite comprehensive resource library as well. So we've had professionals contact us looking for resources, so it's fab. We are supporting 4 families at the moment, which I think is really good considering we're a local service, and we've only been up and running 6 weeks.
Yes, it's phenomenal. Gives you an indication of where you're headed though, doesn't it? How big it's going to get.
I spoke to my line manager today and he said, I think we're going to need 3, Judith. So there's been a really good response, and
that's
again,
a fantastic response like that. It's I mean, the 3 of us, like, we know how much it's needed. We're aware of the scale, but actually, like, in just 6 weeks, the fact you've been able to get word out about it, and all these people have come in just 6 weeks is.
I know. It's actually quite scary. Because I have limited hours, but you know, in particular with my son coming back from residential to live permanently at home, I'm thinking, wow, how do I do this, particularly over the summer holidays? I've not had to think about that for 2.5 years, and then it's.
Do you not? It's one of your techniques. Do you not? So even say I said this out loud on Tuesday to my partner. I said something about something was going to be happening today, and it was a massive conflict, and I'm not going to be able to get her to do that Tuesday, and that was happening on Friday, and I went, whoa. Don't even think about Friday. Do not even think about Friday. It's Tuesday, and that is my big example.
I think you've been looking in at my life.
Well, we have identical lives, whether we like it or not. You can't.
I am well
Because
known.
I think what feeds into your feelings of inadequacy when you are parent a child with FASD, certainly when you don't know, and all you can see is you are getting everything wrong, and the families around you with children the same age are managing after school clubs, they're going swimming together, they're having holidays at centre parks, and
and their kids can stay up a bit later when there's a get together with family.
All you can assume is you aren't doing it right. You're not doing it properly, and you realise one of the hardest things, because in a previous life I was beyond organised, and I was a planner.
I was as well. I'm definitely sure you've been looking in at my life. I was that person. If I said I would meet you at 2 minutes past 12, I would be there at 2 minutes past 12. Now,
to be able to not be able to even and as well is when I've had family saying, right, I can help on Wednesday. What do you need us to do? I don't know.
Got a clue.
Right, because I just if I can plan my day, what do you need us to do? What do you need us to do? This drop off? I don't know.
And then they think you don't want their help.
Because what's worse is undoing it all at the last minute because it just compounds your feelings of failure when
inadequacy.
I can't get anyone into school today, so I don't need help with any school runs because all of a sudden there are no school today.
Yeah. I mean, my son, that will be the same with your children. My son, at 10 o'clock in the morning will be an absolute joy. At 20 past 10, out of nowhere, or at least it appears out of nowhere, there's always a reason behind it. There's utter chaos. And the amount of times I've had to change plans, leave places early, even because obviously my son, when he wasn't in residential, and it will be like this when he comes back permanently in the next 4 weeks, yikes, we share care with his dad. So quite often I had nights off, and my friends would say, great, well, what do you want to do on Saturday night? And I used to say to them, what I want to do, I've had such a really rubbish week. All I want to do is lie on the sofa and, hug myself in a quilt and eat chocolate and watch rubbish on telly. And they just didn't get it. And they said, but you don't have Jason. And I say, but you don't understand. I've got to recover from what went before, because I've got to face all that potentially again the next day or the day after. And people just don't get it. And people very close to me, my parents as well, just tell them. Well, that's.
I think we do. I think we'll probably do ourselves no favours, because I know that I, until very recently, it looked a very different picture looking in at me than what was happening, because I would always have a smile on my face, but actually I was awake around the 24-hour clock for nearly 6 months, maybe getting an hour's 45 minutes there. I got 3 hours sleep together, and 3 hours sleep a night, but that was in chunks, and I lost the ability to actually just function, just function, because of genuinely not tiredness. Parent is tired. It's the sleep deprivation, and you can see why it's a form of torture. But I think I
don't know about you, but I was the same. And even if my son wasn't there, I was awake worrying about the future, or about next week, or about that activity that was going to happen at school that I knew wasn't going to cope with, but school were saying, no, don't worry. And so you're awake, and then of course, like you're saying, sleep deprived, then maybe one of my parents would say the wrong thing, and if I was fine and okay, it would just be like water off a duck's back. But because I was sleep deprived, then we'd get into some sort of conflict, and And it was just awful. And that's what I was talking about relationships, not just intimate personal relationships that affects, but wider family as well. It really does. It really does.
Yeah. So I think I was picking out the positives, because you instinctively isolate yourself from everyone and everything because it's the easiest option. You just naturally start and do it. Like, you think, right, we're not going to be able to go to that party because we realize there's definitely going to be balloons there. That's going to flip her out. Her flipping out is going to really, really dysregulate him. Then they're not going to think he's going to be too haven't eaten. So I'll be like, no, we can't come.
I actually, yeah, and you know, people didn't understand that. I used to do a risk assessment on paper. I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but I did. But now I just do it in my head, and I have done for years. Just do it in my head. I think, right, okay, we've been invited along to this. How many people are going to be there? How noisy is it going to be? Is it going to be tall buildings? Because that's an issue for my son. You know, what's the lighting going to be like? All of those things. Did he sleep last night? How, you know, all of those things. And then I think to myself, nope, not going. And I just say it, nope, not going. And see, when I actually stopped trying to fit. And I don't see my son as, you know, the person with a disability. We are the family that's affected by FASD.
Yeah.
So when I started to, I made a conscious decision to stop trying to fit our square peg of a family into the round hole of what society thought we should do. And life became so much easier. And I wish I'd learnt that lesson years before. Because I used to try so hard to do what everybody else was doing.
You need, but I think if I was brand new to the adopting children with FASD, and someone seasoned down their journey told me that, I don't think I would still believe it. I think I would still try and think, well, I know I'm going to be able to do this. I think I would still. Yeah, I think you have to make your peace. It's a whole process, and there's grieving involved, and you need to make your peace with how it's going to look. How it's going to look very, very different always. How birthdays are going to look very, very different. And
Christmas.
you know, I think
everything. Just Christmas. I mean, we don't do advent calendars. Never have after the first chaotic year of doing them. You know, we don't put a Christmas tree up until a few days before. Etc., etc. You know, you just do it totally differently. We open presents throughout the day, sometimes going into 2 days because it's just too overwhelming. You know, and you just find what works for you. But one of the families that I'm supporting at the moment, just so lovely, you know, sent me a text just the other night saying, Judith, I don't know what I would have done without you. If I hadn't found you, I was just so lost.
Yeah.
And I just thought, this is the reason why, you know, I'm putting in all these hours. This is the reason why I'm so passionate about it, because I didn't want anybody else. Yeah, I didn't want anybody else to feel like how I felt, you know, all those years ago, so alone, and so fearful of the future for my son. You know, what was going to happen. But, you know, along with the challenges with my son, he's an incredible young man, I have to say. He's a really gifted guitar player. He's actually passed guitar exams so that he could actually teach now.
Oh my goodness!
If he had the capacity to do that, but he can play to that level.
Yeah.
So that's what he uses to help him with engage with other children, help him to regulate when he's feeling, you know, when he's struggling, and it also has helped hugely in his self-esteem and the way he sees himself, because for many years he had such a negative view of himself, you know, and I probably fed into that as well, like what we discussed previously, but just, you know, being vulnerable, being bullied, just not understanding why, you know, everyone else around him seemed to manage things that he just couldn't. I mean, you know, I always try to put myself in you know, if it's difficult for me, what's it like in his head, you know?
Yeah.
And that's when, if I'm wearing thin on the therapeutic parenting, which we all do, because, you know, some days I just get it totally wrong, and some days I ace it, and when I ace it, everybody knows about it, and when I get it wrong, everybody knows about it, because I just go to my bed.
Yeah.
And I've got to hide for a little while, and then I get up and start all over again. I've recovered.
Yeah.
But you know, it just is. It's a roller coaster. But if I knew now, well, if I knew back 15 years ago what I know now, a lot of people have asked me, would I have still adopted my son? And my answer is absolutely yes, because he is my son.
Yeah.
And no matter what, we are there for him.
Yeah.
And we are, you know, I'm his greatest supporter, I'm his greatest advocate. And, you know, as I've mentioned, my son was in residential placement for 2.5 years there, and he's due to come home now. And we're really looking forward to that. We know it's not going to be without its challenges, but we're ready. And, you know, going back 3, 4, 5 years ago, I was told you'll never get him into a residential school, never. They'll just not get funded. And my response to that was, watch me.
Yeah.
And I did it.
You probably felt the same about
They make us capable of moving mountains, don't they? They do.
Warrior mamas just don't come close to it. You know, it's like a challenge to me.
Yeah.
And you know, when things aren't going right and I have to write one of those emails, quite often I start it with, here is one of those emails.
It's great listening to you both. You know, you've like acknowledging the similarities that you've had on your parenting journeys. Having, you know, I hadn't connected that you will have both adopted around the same time and have gone on, you know, that your kids were similar ages and you've gone on these journeys sort of like parallel, really. And the similarities there that, as Judith, you just explained, are replicated by what your children have experienced through that journey as well. And, you know, you talk about the bullying and not fitting in the playground, but that applied to the two of you also, where other parents are kind of looking in and being like, you know, why aren't they disciplining their child and things like that. And unfortunately, you guys are that first wave in the UK, and, you know, the first people to pave the way, and your children, unfortunately, are some of the first to experience all these things. But what's coming out of it is two of, you know, the fiercest and most passionate lioness style mothers that I know. And, you know, that applies to all of the FASD parents that we've spoken to, because as you say, they put you in a position where you have no choice but to start moving mountains. And
I never thought that I had the capability or the resilience to cope with what I've coped with, and what I probably will have to cope with in years to come as he moves into, you know, adolescence and young adulthood. And but I know that I'll be with him every step of the way. Exactly.
And as you're navigating that, you're passing all of this information back behind you. And, you know, you guys, as that first wave, have got the hardest job out there, you know, figuring it out.
Uncharted, isn't it? We're navigating all of the uncharted waters, and but making sure that we're kind of drawing a map and letting people know the best way
to support other families. Absolutely. And you know, just talking about my son there, he is very aware that I speak about him.
My children are, my 3 are, and they actually, the boys are like, but my daughter, you know, they're not bothered either way. They're certainly not interested. But my daughter loves the fact that I do it.
My son does as well. He knows I've been in the press. He knows I've been on TV. He knows that I've even spoken about child-to-parent violence. There was actually BBC Scotland, it was last week, I think it was, but I recorded it quite a number of months ago around child-to-parent abuse. However, it was anonymous, because I really didn't want, people to recognise that it was my son. But I'm very vocal at speaking out. I'm very open about it. My son knows. He knows that I've shared photographs of some of my injuries and things like that. And he says to me, "Mummy, you have to do it, because you have to stop other children and other mums and dads going through what we've gone through."
Yeah.
So he's a great supporter, and he's actually participating, which I am amazed at. And he's doing really well. He's participating in some FASD research at the moment.
Oh, is he?
Yes.
That's amazing.
So it's fantastic. So this weekend he'll be taking lots of photographs of activities or places or things that he does to help him cope with his FASD.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be interesting. So I'm really proud of him for doing that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It is.
Thank you so much for talking to us, Judith. It's been, I know every time I speak to someone in our situation, it just you go through a roller coaster yourself. So you get this wave of anger it brings back all the anger about social care and withholding information and leaving us in the dark, but then you think, because I believe my children are my purpose in life.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I was meant to get exactly where I am now. Yeah. And then you just, but it can sometimes be a bit daunting and a little bit scary.
It's overwhelming.
It's just such a comfort to, whenever you hear somebody's story, it's like you're just building up the tribe and you're building up this network, because there are just so many of us. Just hundreds of thousands more of us than anyone could ever begin to imagine.
Absolutely. And going from, that standalone mother that thought she was completely alone to, 7, 8 years later, realising, wow, there's actually, a real movement here.
Yeah.
And, you can, I can never, peer support is just the thing that has got me through the really darkest moments. And there's a lot of Facebook groups, closed Facebook groups that you can join, and if it wasn't for them and a really good children and family social worker, I don't know how we would have got through a couple of really tough years. So it is strength in numbers.
I think that's a really important point to leave this on, really, because anybody who's listening to this, who's starting their journey or is in the process of adoption and wondering if they can do this because of known prevalence rates and questioning FASD, or anybody who's much earlier in their journey, there are now communities there. There are supports there. The journey starting now will look very, very different, and there's people out there to learn from, and those people who have gone first have set up services, set up podcasts, have done all these things when they should have been sleeping, but have been unable to sleep.
I always say to my son that he's an FASD trailblazer. That's what I say to him. Because I have used our journey to inform service providers, to support other parents. So I very much view him, if he hadn't come into my life, if we hadn't found each other, well, it was just inevitable. We were meant to be together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking to us. Thank you so much for sharing your story. We're going to definitely not forget to share the link to the resource, because that sounds absolutely amazing. And I'm sure we'll let you. We'll give you a little bit of time to get a little bit further embedded into the journey with the service. and I'm sure we'll come back and we'll have a little update and we'll see how things are going and exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
And
Brilliant.
good luck this weekend.
Thank you, and good luck, or I'm coming home permanently. Thanks a lot, guys.
Oh, that's lovely. Thanks, Judith.
Thank you.